why did you buy email is very important in the post purchase, because it does influence not just like product page copy, sales copy, but again, back to the browse abandonment. If you identify if you identify responses in there that are at the browse abandonment level, like people who were more like they still don't know too much about the brand or just broadly the products, you know, if they say like they're excited because they finally found a brand that like say the ingredients are like sustainable and all these kinds of things. That's more of like a brand level thing, and you get that kind of pattern. You know that's something you reinforce in the browse abandonment. So even that, even though that's a post purchase thing, it's like that feeds back into all the other flows, but like browse abandonment, some of those feedback specifically in a browse abandonment. So that's always an important one to have, is that post purchase why did you buy type of email.
Yeah, 100%.
Well, I mean, that was a really bad time for the Wi-Fi to cut off. I don't know if there's anything we didn't cover. I mean, do we talk enough maybe about like info products, how this might look different for like digital info products or coaching offers? I mean, I mentioned that at the beginning, but do you think there's any key things to talk about there?
I think we've already addressed that in a lot of previous episodes. Like, for example, like an intent sequence, like you mentioned earlier, like what Chris Orzechowski does, is no different than I think effectively what he does is he just uses his launch emails or the best hits of whatever product he's selling, right? Like I always attribute this to like if you were used to watching reruns of Seinfeld or Friends or How I Met Your Mother on like paid cable, what you'll find is it's always the same episodes that they play. And sometimes you're just like, there's 9 seasons of this shit. Why is it always the same like 10 episodes that are on? And it's because when they aired those episodes in the first time they were ever released, those are the ones that got the best ratings. So they always do that because they know they're the ones that are going to perform the best to get people addicted to the show and get them to continue watching, right? And that's effectively what you want to do with your emails as well. When you do something like an intent sequence, or even something I do after a welcome sequence, is sometimes you could just have an autoresponder of your best hit emails, right? Because what a lot of people don't think about after a welcome sequence is not necessarily the fact that you want to indoctrinate people into your ways and try to sell your high ticket offer and all that, is you want to get people addicted to reading your emails too. So what you want to do is extend your welcome sequence to the length that it requires to achieve that, or until you have no more of your best emails that you can send. So usually what I recommend people do is write your welcome sequence and then take your best hits and just add those to the tail end of your welcome sequence. And that'll at least get people addicted to reading your emails and looking forward to what you have to say and write. And a lot of those best hits are probably the ones that you could also use for something like a intent sequence, right? Especially if they're selling something, right? That's how I would do it. And I usually follow the same kind of structure in most of my promos, launches, or anything where I'm writing something sales wise. Is what's the sequence of points you would write and say in a sales letter, and rather than write that down, write it sideways. Right. So first email is the offer, like what's cool about your offer. Second one is like the hero story / problem solution. And then like a paradigm shift email. And then after you've made all your claims and try to prove your point and all that, then move into objection handling and then scarcity urgency. Right. And I use that pretty much for every sequence I've ever written. And it's never not done well, because effectively what you're doing is you're triggering all the emotions you need to and handling every part of the sales sequence you need to do. It's just now that you're just doing it sideways and on a series of days rather than expecting people to read it all at once. So the worst thing you could do is treat emails like they're a sales letter, but you should treat every email sequence like it is a sales letter, if that makes any sense, right? And also never assume anybody's read your previous emails. Right. So if there's something that people need to know to take the action, make sure that's reiterated in every email. Yeah, you could say it in the same way, but effective sales copy comes from writing the same thing in a different way, right? And that's effectively what NLP is. If anybody's ever uh, dived into that, is the effect of like auto suggestion and getting people to do certain commands and getting people to believe certain things is by repeating it in several different ways so that they then believe it themselves, right? And that's what you want to do with your sales messaging too, right?
Yeah, I do like just like with other email sequences or even promos, an intent sequence, the browser abandonment for digital products kind of works best like that. Like you said, you do want to go back and like if you sent emails about it before, which is like Chris
Yeah.
Orzgowski, he's sent like zillions of emails for his product. So that's funny. I'm actually the one helping him build all that out because he's too busy
Oh
doing it
shit.
himself. So, he has
There we
some, but
go.
like one of the things I'm working on with him is doing that. But what I'm gonna do, and what I assume he's done, is go in, find all of them, and then look, okay, which ones perform the best, right? And then think about like the logical order of what you want to send. Kind of like what you were saying, where individual emails should not be sales letters. Each email in a sequence is part of a sales letter. It makes an
Yes.
entire sales letter in some sense with little extras to because you do have to repeat
Yeah.
things differently. Like my
Yeah.
I should say my sales letter, I have like a CTA in every section. So everywhere there is a chance
Mhm.
to click through. If this section got someone to want to buy, they can click through. Emails the same way. It's like you've taken those sections and just like turned them into just individual emails. So what we're going to do is which ones perform the best. I mean, we're going to think about like how long we want the sequence to be. They can probably be fairly long if we have a lot of high performing emails. How long we want to be though, and then what logical order it goes in. Like we're not going to put like some short email that's about like some specific thing in there first. That'll come later on. That'll be like a for a digital product that's kind of like a feature focused email where it's like you'll in this particular lesson of the course you'll learn this. That's usually a good way to some people will buy an entire course because of a specific lesson that teaches something, so you can that would come later, but the first one would be like what the offer is and then like the origin or product creation story of the offer, so on and so forth. So it's that ends up following kind of the sales letter logic, and we might have a testimonials email, for example, or a customer story email, like some like a student or two students or something who had great success with the product, but that would be a little bit later in the sequence because you don't just like open up with proof unless your hook is like a customer story or something. You could potentially do that, but usually it would be a little bit more about like what it is and then why it exists and then why it's different and then here's what other people have said, just like a typical sales letter order. I think that the hardest thing is just like picking. I mean, beside I guess you can look at performance kind of, but not entirely, because what performed best to that audience, new people who are like clicking through and clicking on it, it may be a little different. So you performance is going to be like 85% of what you look at for determining which emails to pick. But you may like some emails may not contextually really work. Like if it's like a deadline driven email where it's like if it was like a live workshop and now it's a recording, like you can't be like we go live tomorrow. Like you can't use an email like that. So you might have to swap that out. And there are some emails where there's like they're mostly evergreen, but there's like some certain elements where it's like it was time based, like deadline based at a certain time. Like with Chris, like we're gonna some of the emails will be able to just like repurpose entirely, but some of them will require like got to rewrite this little part here because this thing about this deadline or this fast action one time only bonus or the price has changed, so you got to change those. But a lot of it is just like finding the top performers, trying to get not just finding top performers, but finding top performers that also meet those different kind of like sales letter components, and
Yeah.
then arranging them in
100%.
the right logical order so that someone feels like they're moving through a sales letter, and so it feels a lot more natural and not like everything's out of place.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then the other thing that I think would be good to point out is we mentioned on the fulfillment side of things to ask people why they buy. That does two things. Not only do they tell you what they're looking forward to, the actual reason why they bought, but what it will also tell you is which email
Yep.
worked. Just because people buy off today's email, that wasn't their sales decision email. Sometimes the sales decision email was last week, but because they got reminded about that decision and they didn't pull the trigger, um, because of today's email that potentially reiterated the same thing that they just needed to hear more than once. What
Or
you
it
want
could
to
have
do,
been like it could have just been like they needed to get paid or something like that, and they got
yeah,
paid,
they were putting it off,
2
right?
days later, and then they got the next email, and now they're like, "Oh, yeah, but that email, they clicked through that and bought," but it's like that whatever that email was, it was the email a few days ago. They just didn't,
Yes,
they needed their paycheck, or I don't know, like, they needed their, client to pay them or something like that, so, yeah. Sorry, keep going.
exactly. Right? Like, and that's the worst thing you could do is not necessarily like what most people tell you to do is, okay, you made 70 sales on day 6 of your promo. People are going to assume day six's email is the one that did all the heavy lifting. That's bullshit. It was the last week's worth of emails and that succession of those messages that you sent that did all the selling. It's just number 6 was that tipping point that just like shoved them off the fence just ever so slightly. So what you need to do, and that's why I like to ask, what made you buy? What are you looking forward to the most? And the fulfillment side of things is that information will be handed to you on a silver platter when you ask it in the right way, because the things that you said in those emails, if they reiterate them to you, you'll know which ones actually did the heavy lifting for you. And actually, then when you build out these sequences later on, like the intent sequences we just talked about right now, that's what's going to allow you to actually do that. Otherwise, you could potentially be adding in emails that looked like they were the heavy lifters, but then effectively do nothing for you on a later date because they're just a good push off the fence email, but not the heavy lifter that actually did all the sales talk that was needed, right?
Yeah, and there's one other hidden benefit from that. If they're going through that intense sequence and you keep getting, if one of those emails keeps resonating with people, well, you don't just like stop selling that product because you have an intense sequence. Like, again, I keep going back to Chris Orzechowski because he's the one who has like all of this like
Yeah.
nicely set up. If he keeps getting feedback that a certain email or 2 emails are doing most of his selling for email flow bootcamp, well, when he writes emails to his list selling email flow bootcamp, he might start to lean more of those emails towards that, which means, you know, more. It's like a constantly like iterative optimization process. He's going to start writing emails that are a little more leaning towards those angles that work, which means more people are just buying right there. Some people will still click through and then go through the intent sequence, which by then you'll be able to improve the intent sequence so that more of the emails maybe lean towards whatever angles are converting people. So you have more people buying right away, which is better cash flows. More people are buying immediately off his emails now, so he gets better cash flows. And then the people who go into the intent sequence, a larger portion of that smaller number of people, because more people are buying up front, will now convert earlier or convert at all, which means better cash flows there too, and just a better conversion rate. So it becomes this interesting little flywheel of you build on the flow, and that you find out what's working in the flow, which helps you improve your broadcasts, and those broadcasts help you. Maybe you find out new things that can then, like if you send a new broadcast that does really well, maybe that can now take the spot of a lower performing intent sequence email, and so now your intent sequence performance goes up, and then it kind of like constantly like goes back and
Yeah.
forth. Each one refines itself, and yeah, I mean, nice little flywheel there too.
Yeah. And here's my little secret that I've almost never talked about when I use AI for email is if you have an email that annihilated, resend it after 90 days and keep
Yep.
resending it after every 90 days. When it starts to fatigue, you know that angle worked, but the messaging that you're sending has fatigued. Use AI, upload your email, and say, "Hey, this angle is what works on my audience. I know it does." And for example, myself, um, I write a lot of story based emails. I then ask AI to then scrub the internet and find a story similar to the one I used for that angle to come up with a new story because I know the bottom 2/3 of that email work, right? The sales ability of the message works, the CTA works, everything else, but like the initial tip in point, which is the story, has now been fatigued because I've said it too many times. And then now I have a new story. Tell it to give you like 10 different ones. Figure out which one. You got to use your own discernment, your own taste and stuff like that, the things that actually like work. But use AI to then search the internet or even just be a normal person and consume decent content, and maybe you'll be able to come up with them on your own. But this is a fast way that I've found to use that, because something I've done, especially to help clients out really fast, is if I'm ever given a project and we're redoing a sales sequence that's fatigued and it used to perform, usually all it requires is just a relead, because that's what we used to do back in the day when you do a sales letter, right? Like I've literally I've seen it where you have a sales letter, it used to perform, now it doesn't, and all it required was like chopping off the top third of the sales letter and just getting to the point faster, and now it's making sales again. Like nothing needed to be changed other than tweaking the headline a bit, changing the lead a bit, and just getting to the point faster, right? So how can you do that? And sometimes AI can be really helpful for that kind of thing, and that's the thing I use it for the most, when I take something that's already working and I just either want to make it better or say it in a different way. That way you can reuse something already works.
Yeah. Well, I don't think there's any other browser. We end up running the top. I mean, intent sequences
Yeah,
are
we
like
always
a
do
part of
this.
it. I mean, it's relevant though, because I mean, funnels are all connected. So like, if you're
Yeah,
talking
that's the
about
point.
an intent sequence, if you say too fast, it sounds like intense sequence, but
I know. That's what I thought first. Yeah.
but yeah, intent sequence is connected to your sales page and everything, and which is connected to your broadcast emails, and then of course with browse abandonment, that's connected to your product pages, which is connected probably to your emails as well, and it's all connected. So when you talk about a browse abandonment or an intent sequence, you're going to other parts of the funnel connect to it as well. So it's important to like know all that context.
Yeah,
None
of
of this
course.
is just in isolation, obviously. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, man. So this was a little bit of a two-part series, since our first edition of this got off on us
Yeah.
about 20 minutes ago.
For everyone who just joined, we were like 30 minutes in or something like that, and then
Yeah,
our
and
Wi-Fi cut out. So, if you're on our list, you'll probably get two different
two recordings.
live recordings when we send them out. So, of course, I pay like a stupid amount of money for Wi-Fi that drops almost every single time I need to do anything important. So you'll probably get two different recordings from us. Watch the first one as well, because there's some good stuff in there about browse banning and its sequences, what they do, and um, some key elements you want to have in them. So make sure you watch both of them. But yeah, I think we've covered the topic pretty in depth across both of them. So yeah.
Yeah, we definitely beat it to death, but and then added like a shit ton more, like we usually do. But yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, man. I think we're good. Thanks everybody for joining, and yeah, we'll see you guys next week.
Yeah. See y'all.